And I'm back again to do probably a shorter, maybe. We'll see where it goes. I never know where these things are going to end up going or how long they're going to be. But this topic will be on how the ocean and other things, everything really, kind of tracks information and records information, and how the world it's made up of everything that happens with itself. So this is something I was just thinking about one time when I was at the ocean, and I was just looking at people's footsteps washing away and looking at how the water moves around rocks and just how the water behaves differently as it washes ashore depending on what's on the shore. I'll give you some more sceneries. So if you can picture just sitting on the beach or walking on the beach, and you're watching the waves come in, wash up on the shore, washing back out to sea. And it's doing that over and over and over, infinitely, just never stops. And if you ever gone to the beach, like during the day, and then went back maybe the next morning or something, and if you're there during the day and into the evening, you see all kinds of things, maybe sandcastles kids built, or big things people built. I know I've seen adults making some pretty crazy, like dolphins and actual size, like alligators and stuff like that out of sand on the beach, which is always really cool to see. There's footprints everywhere. There's holes people dig. There's holes from people poking umbrellas in the ground. There's all kinds of remnants that life was going on there, and that people were there, and that pets were there, and all that. And then you can go back the next morning, early in the morning before people are there, and it's all gone. It's just all erased, all of that. And it's a pristine beach again from the water washing up and washing those footprints away and all of that. And then you have big rocks that are there by the shore that the water comes up and washes around and all that. Well, when you think about that water washing up, all of that energy that is carrying that water up is going to do something completely different based on what kind of stuff is on the beach. Water is going to behave differently as it washes up on a beach that has no rocks versus a beach that has a couple rocks on it. Obviously, that water is going to break around that rock, go to each side of it, and meet up around the back of it, and then continue on until it washes back down into the ocean. If there's holes dug or footprints in the sand, then that water is going to behave differently as it washes up and fills up those holes versus washing up across a flush, flat, sandy beach. And the way that water behaves, the way that energy is transferred on the shore will determine how it goes back out to the ocean. If it comes up on a flat, flat surface, a flat beach, and washes back, you're just going to see it come up and go back down. And if there's stuff on the beach, you're going to see it, like I said, come up. Some of the water is going to fill up holes, and as that water drops down into there and creates a little depth, it's going to change how the water behind it flows over it and all that. And then it's going to wash back into the sea differently too. And then as it washes back into the sea, like, as water washes ashore, it doesn't do the same thing every time. It all depends on how it lines up with the incoming waves. Sometimes a wave will come up and come 20 feet onto the shore. because there was no water rushing back into the sea in such a way that it disturbs the incoming wave, or it slows it down, or it just makes it not go as far up the beach. Sometimes when the water comes up, it goes back into the sea, and it does it at just the perfect time that it crashes with waves that are coming in, and then they kind of cancel each other out. And then that incoming wave that gets canceled out doesn't go up as far onto shore. And all that is that's not just water, that's all just a transfer of energy going back and forth. Well, every time that water comes up and goes back to sea, ooh, the woodpecker, I hear it. Every time that water comes up and washes back out to sea, it does that in a very specific way that it wouldn't do if anything was different about the sand, if anything was different about what's on the shore. It's going to wash back out to sea a very specific way if there's 3 footprints in a rock right where it washed up. And then, of course, it's not just separate waves all along the beach. It's connected to all the water that's next to it, that's behind it, that was in front of it. So it's going to affect all those waves differently too. And then it's all going to wash back to sea in a very specific way based on whatever it encountered when it washed ashore. Ooh, that sounded like something bigger in there. Let's see. No, maybe not. Thought maybe it was a deer or something. Wouldn't be surprised, since apparently every state animal has a white-tailed deer as their state animal, or at least 3. Oh, at least 4, I guess. But anyway, so however that water washes up, it creates a very specific way it's going to wash down back into the ocean. And then the way it washes back will affect everything differently. Everything that energy washing back encounters in the ocean is going to affect differently. Maybe there's a crab that was close to shore. Well, when that water washes back a certain way, it's going to move that crab to a different spot in the ocean compared to if that water were to wash up and wash back a different way. And if you could take a snapshot of exactly where that crab is, and you had enough information around it, you could tell exactly what that wave did to it, where it moved it to. And if you can tell where that wave moved the crab to, you could tell how much energy that wave had when it washed back into the water. And if you can tell how much energy it had when it washed back into the water, you can tell how much energy it had when it washed up. If you can tell how much energy it had when it washed up on shore, then you can tell any kind of maybe disturbances it encountered, like a rock on the beach or a footprint in the sand. And if you could you can backtrack all that information to find out whatever you want. Of course, this would be impossible for a person to do, but it would follow the rules of the universe if you were able to do that. So if you take a snapshot of any part of the ocean at any given time, you can backtrack it like that and see what happened. So you, like, by judging from where that crab is at any specific time in the ocean, you would be able to tell what a certain part of that beach looked like just by backtracking whatever affected the crab in order for it to be in that specific spot, and then what affected the wave that moved it to that spot, and then what affected that wave to, like I said, wash back out to sea, and then which would be how it washed up and what's on the beach and all that. So it's this whole like cause and effect thing that you could backtrack, I guess theoretically, to the beginning of time. But the exact way, if you were to snapshot every bit of information about the ocean right now, the very specific way it is, that would be completely different if the smallest thing was changed before that. If that rock wasn't on the beach, it would change some part of the ocean in some way or another. So if you were able to snapshot all the information about the ocean, you'd be able to tell what every beach on Earth looked like at any given time. So that's what I mean when I talk about the ocean having memory and recording information, because you could find out any information about anything the ocean's encountered at any given time, and then you could backtrack it even more to not just things that the ocean has encountered directly, but you could, like, say you're looking at that crab that's in a certain spot in the ocean, you could backtrack that to how the wave washed out to move the crab, how the wave washed up before it moved back out to sea. And then you could look at maybe 3 footprints that wave encountered. And then from there, you could be like, okay, well, this person, you could follow those footprints back to see what exactly the person that left that footprint or those footprints did. And then you could just backtrack a whole bunch of information about that person and people that person has encountered and things about how that person's day went and all kinds of stuff like that, or even birds. So the ocean not only records information about beaches and sea animals, but about everything that could be in some number of degrees within the waves washing up. And it's pretty, like, when you really extrapolate that out and think of the implications that has, it's really kind of incredible. And this isn't just limited to the ocean. You could go as far as to, like, say you go out to the desert and you pick up 1 grain of sand. Well, that grain of sand could tell you about the wind and what blew that grain of sand to where it's at, or an animal that picked it up at some point. And then the way the wind was blowing across the desert when it moved that grain of sand could tell you stuff about the shape and elevation or height, I guess, of nearby mountains and other land features nearby. Or maybe there is a cactus in front of that grain of sand that made the wind do something different when it blew by and moved that grain of sand to somewhere else instead of where it would be if there was no cactus there. So everything records memory like that, really. It's not just the ocean, it's just once something happens, whether we as human beings can pick up that information and translate it into something conceivable, whether or not we can do that, that information is still out there somewhere. So the information of everything that has ever happened in the entire universe is still out there. And I hope that was an okay way of traversing the scale of things. There's obviously an infinite amount of examples you could give for this particular thing, but those are a couple. Even just light itself, light records information and then takes it other places. This is why we're able to see, millions of years back in time in the universe, because we're looking at light that's traveling to us from places that are so far away and so long ago. Which is kind of crazy that when you think about that, because nothing you experience is happening when you experience it. there's always that element of time. If you're, looking at a tree, light has to bounce off that tree and make it to you before you can see it. And then even after you see it, it's going to take a very small amount of time for your brain to process it and be like, oh, that's a tree. So it's funny that like we always talk about living in the now, but most of the time that's not even a possible thing to do, because your entire experience is history. Your entire experience is already happened. At least like what you think of as your current now experience, it's already happened, even if it's just fractions of a millisecond ago. You're never experiencing anything definitively now. Another bunny. That's why it's so special when you do experience a moment of nowness, or as close to it as possible, because there's nothing going on except your experience, except your awareness. Because even if you're thinking of words, it's like you have something that creates a thought, and then it creates a thought, and then you translate that thought into words in your head. And even if you're not communicating that thought to someone, you're still thinking of those words in your head. And it still takes time to form those words. And it still takes processes in your brain to turn that thought into words that you know. And words that you know mean that thought that you had. It'd be really interesting to be able to go a day without having any concept of language or anything like that, just to see what that experience would be like and what that awareness would be like. But that about covers what I wanted to talk about as far as that goes. So I will get off here and get back on with my walk. Peace.